And just like Rush started a new period in their music, so did ZZ Top. And this is, I think, the period that, although made ZZ Top superstars, for ZZ Top lovers, those who like the original, let's just say the authentic ZZ Top, this is not a good period. They came out with Eliminator, which is laden and written with synthesizers and very poppy synth pop, super commercial, contemporary, very playing into the audiences, the very general music MTV audience. This was 1983, so we already have MTV, and I think this is where they made the first music videos, at least the big explosive ones. This is a record that practically everybody knows. People who never heard of ZZ Top will know these songs because they were played so many times on the radio and MTV and things of that nature. Nonetheless, as much as there is to criticize the sound and the aspect of the record, it's not a bad record. Surprisingly, it's a very pleasant, good to listen to record. The songs are good. The songwriting here went up a notch of professionalism and perfection, which kind of adds both to its charm, both to its good aspects and to the bad aspects. But bottom line, it has a slew of big hits, Legs, of course, and Sharp Dressed Man, Got Me Under Pressure. That's a real good one. Give Me Your Love in the opening song. I Need You Tonight, The Bad Girl. All of them. TV Dinners. If only I could flag her down. Very. It's a good record, It's kind of on one hand, it pains me to say it, but it's a good, very good record. And I wish I could say the same thing about the next record, which is the Afterburner. This one is a heap of puke. I tried loving it. I tried not to be biased against it, but I just put it on the other day, about a week or so ago. And no, it's horrible. This record, really, they went overboard. I know that it went multi-platinum and sold millions and trillions of records, and it has the big hits. But to me, this just does not work at all. What they did here, to me, is analogous with what Kiss did with Crazy Nights, and maybe even worse. I think from their perspective, the falling off of the cliff is even worse. I mean, this record is really puke in the sound and the aspect, and even though some of the songs are well written and they play well, but the whole sound is just, better forget it. And luckily enough, these guys were able to catch themselves in time, and not only in time, but in the quality and the degree that they made the correction. So let's just say Kiss, that I just mentioned, after Crazy Night, Hot in the Shade was a notable improvement. Or Priest, the same thing. After Turbo, they did Ram It Down, but it's still a day too late and a dollar short. I think that ZZ Top was able to overcome this a step better, although to their not their credit, to their debit maybe, to their debit, I would say that there was a 5-year pause or a 5-year gap between those two records. So after Afterburner, which came out in 85 or 86, then the next one, Recycler, came out in 90. So here, pretty much everybody saw the writing on the wall, right? We knew that bands like Guns N' Roses and Queensryche, and we were talking about Seattle bands. So the whole media, the rock press, made an about face and turned on this hard rock, heavy metal, what you would call hair metal. So maybe compared to this, they didn't make such a big correction, but Recycler is much better. The sound is normal. This is like a normal but modern ZZ Top. You got My Head in Mississippi, that's a great one. You got Burger Man, you got I Gotta Make a Decision to Avoid a Collision, Concrete and Steel, the opener, talent. So it's a very very good record. Pretty much beginning of 2000 blues. That's a great one. So they might have a dot or two here, but all in all, the record is very very good. It's still modernized, but not ultra modernized. It's not like it's dripping cheese and sugar and over sweetened corn syrup. What is it called? I forgot the super cheesy chocolatey thing. So this is it. This is the three pariahs or the three bad boys on the ZZ Top end. So let's go back to our friends, our Canadian friends, Rush, the other trio, and they release a live album, Exit Stage Left, which is good. It encompasses what I think there was already another live record before, but this one concentrates on the then recent records and pretty good rendition. So the sound is good, and it's Exit Stage Left is a pretty raw and nice natural sounding live album. So worth having. Rush also went on to the synthesizers. So you may claim that I'm kissing their ass, you may say that I'm sucking up to them, but in my opinion, this was more of an honest experimentation and exploring other directions rather than following the trends. I mean, whatever you want to say about the next couple records by Rush, they were anything but trendy. Yes, they were synth heavy, a lot of synthesizers, but trendy they were not. And here comes Signals, another very famous Rush record, another very well-known record. Many people will tell you that this is defining to Rush, kind of like 2112, not to that extent. I think that no one would be walking up in the middle of the night and someone tells him, Rush, hey, Signals, but it's pretty close. So it's a very very characteristic. At least it characterizes or is the poster boy for that era. If it has, of course, the big hit Subdivisions, which opens the record, and then it has they have sort of a thematic group of songs that talk about dictatorship and oppression and suppression of freedom of speech, kind of apropos, which it always is, unfortunately. And actually, it might not be on this record. The Weapon, yeah, the Weapon Part 1 and Part 2. I think that's what starts it, and then they have one on the next record. And anyway, it's not so interesting. Great record, introducing a very synth-heavy sound for Rush, brand new sound, super polished sound. And Neil keeps going into this direction of playing all kind of drum patterns and cymbals, and that's almost integral part of the melody itself. So very very with the melody, and of course more complicated drum patterns, and actually Getty's bass is a little bit slipping here into the background, not so prominent as it started becoming in the past couple records, because he's concentrating more on the synth. Sometimes the synth itself does the bass, which is not great, but again, ironically here in this band and what they were doing, it works out very good. And this is 1982. 1984 brings us to Grace Under Pressure, and I can tell you that two hands down, this is my all-time favorite Rush record, and it was among the first batch of Rush that I bought. I think the first one I got is Hemispheres. That's the one that kind of got me hooked, and I forgot what I had afterwards. Maybe Caress of Steel or 2112. Those were the first one, but this definitely was the first one that I bought that had the heavy synthesizers, and it hit me. And as you would expect, first I said, what the hell is this? What is it supposed to mean? But a couple of minutes into the music, I was like, okay, this is Rush. This is just a slightly different level or different dimension even, as far as Rush goes. The songs are bangers one to the other. There's not a bad minute on this album, I think. It's it's very depressive. It's like a very, very pessimistic, very depressing record. It's all gray, and even the album cover kind of goes well with the music, like a very chilly, wintry, blood chilling. It's not a happy record. Actually, it has a song After Image, which grabbed me right in the beginning. And in '94, when my best friend died, he got killed. I was listening to this song nonstop, and at the time I didn't know that it was going to be even more significant to me. More than a decade later, when my mother died, so I was just playing this song nonstop, over and over again, because of the lyrical theme. Again, amazing record, and for me, two hands down, my all-time favorite Rush record. The next one, Power Windows, follows in the same vein. Here they kind of toned it down in the let's just say sweetness or polishedness of the overall sound, especially in the guitar. So they put a little bit more guitar, but it's the same idea. Very, very synth heavy. I think the bass came back a little bit here, not tremendously, but it did to some extent. And actually, this record took some time for me to grow on. When I just listened to it in the record store and I just picked it up, I kind of this is close enough to Grace Under Pressure for me to like. And then when I brought it home, it took me a good number of listens. I like, first I was, ugh, what is this? But it goes very much, a lot of intricate drum patterns here. You got the Manhattan Project, which is an amazing song. Of course, Mystic Rhythms, that's the closing of the album. Marathon, Territories, all really grand designs. The opening, the Big Money, that's the one that's, I think it's a single off of the record. So they really hit it off, and they got a big winner here. But again, they pretty much have it with almost all of their records, so it's kind of becoming repetitive. But I'm talking about a winner. I don't know how it did commercially. I think all their records did acceptably good. They never really lost money. I think from the time that they became famous. I think that from the 2112 or Hemisphere's time, they all did very well. At least for sure from Permanent Waves. Next up is Hold Your Fire, which I think they're starting to curb their appetite for synthesization. Okay, so their appetite for synthesization or synthesization is starting to ebb here. Here they tone it down. They're going back to a little bit more natural sound. So imagine a little bit between Moving Pictures and Power Windows, kind of, sort of. But they tone down everything. So the complicatedness of the songs and the intricacy, they kind of started holding back, and this is going to become much more apparent and a big trend in pretty much everything that follows after the next couple records. So it's a good record, but between these, I think it's a little bit less good. It's kind of not on par with Power Windows, and definitely not with Grace Under Pressure. Next up, Presto. This is the big one. This was released in '88 or '89. Oh, there is a live record here, Show of Hands, which is a little bit more polished than the previous live records, a little bit more well made or more professionally made. But again, back to Presto, which was the record that I was seeing all over the time. All over the place. And as you would expect with Presto, they also curbed a little bit the prominence of all the techno stuff and the synths, but it's a little bit more open and more apparent than in Hold Your Fire, interestingly. In my opinion, this is definitely a better record than Hold Your Fire, and this is kind of my favorite period Rush. So Signals to Presto, those 4 or 5 records are, to me, the Rush. Like when I think Rush, I think those records, even though the previous batch of four, meaning from Caress of Steel to Hemispheres, is more defining the band as a whole. But I like this period more than anything else that they ever did. And with Presto, one period actually ends. And so, since we're done with Presto, we can go back to ZZ Top. And again, I apologize that I said not nice things about them, but hey, that's life. You can't always get it right. They go to sleep again for about 4 years, and they come out with Antenna. And when I picked up this record in the record store, I was ecstatic because it was so good. It was, to me, a bona fide, honest to God return to the good old ZZ Top. And they didn't do it fake. It sounded very good and very honest and very raw. And it was in sharp contrast to what you could hear then on the radio. What was famous at the time. That was kind of the pseudo raw. I know I kind of sound like a broken record. I don't like that period and that kind of music that was very prevalent. Actually, at the time, I wasn't even so conscious to it because I didn't really realize what was going on until it was pretty much over. But back to Antenna, it's a very good record, definitely a must-have. So if you're just dabbling into ZZ Top, or you don't want to have the entire library, this is definitely one that I could wholeheartedly recommend. It's really good. It may have a little bit of a dud here and there, but overall, the record is very fluid. It plays. It's like a good long drink of cold water or a good bottle of whiskey. The record is good. It has the gritty, natural raw sound in the guitars, in the bass, in the singing, in the drums, but it's not stripped down. It's not simplistic, and they did a little bit more, obviously not progressive, but slightly more sophisticated. So they didn't try to be simplistic on purpose. They didn't try to monkey the very early records, let's just say before the 80s. So kudos. It's a great record to me. Really ranks among my very favorites. So PCH was a good one. Antenna Head is kind of like a Heard It on the X remade for the mid 90s. Deal Going Down, Breakaway. It's really a Pincushion, the opener. I love this record. They really nailed the sound so good. I just love it. And just when I thought that it couldn't get any better, pretty early, 2 or 3 years later, they released Rhythmine. I hope I'm saying this right, but again, it's like another step in the same direction, but even more. So it's like Antenna is like stepping in the mud on a not very well paved road, and Rhythmine is like stepping in the mud with both boots on a country road. It's really good. The gritty voice, the gritty bass. The bass comes to the fore a little bit more than before. The drums are very good, hard and natural. Man, Black Fly has a crazy intro to it. Hairdresser is great. My Mind's Gone Loaded. They really a very good gritty record, and this. I typically put this in Antenna at the top of my choice of ZZ Top records, right? After these two records, I'm not really sure what got into them, but they released Triple X 30, probably a play on word, Triple X, but they like to write or to sing Triple X lyrics disguised as kind of innocent kind of nursery rhymes or something like that. Anyway, this record, in my opinion, is mostly a dud. It's not like it's terrible and it's horrible to listen, but like, what are you trying to do? They try to do kind of sort of an afterburner meets one of the earlier records, maybe Tejas, or Tres Hombres, and kind of bring it to the 21st century. This was released in 2000 or so, give or take a year. So they're definitely a step back from the previous two. Maybe they felt that making another one kind of like in that vein would be repetitive, which I think is stupid, especially we're talking about ZZ Top. But I don't like this record one little bit. I'm sorry. This is among their worst records, and it's kind of sort of the idea of Afterburner. Definitely not as bad, but I don't know. They kind of the guitars are thinner, and the drum is kind of thin and a little too high. I just don't like this record. They have fairly good songs. It's worth a listen if you just want to know what it is. But but to me, it's definitely it's far from being a great record. So now we already in 1999 with our Blazing Texans. So let's go back to our friends Rush, because with them, if you remember, we left off at Presto, which came out in '89, and in 1991, for the new decade, they come out with a new direction. So Presto kind of seals the synthesizer era, and Roll the Bones opens the stripped era. I think they have a couple records. To me, the first thing that came to mind when I heard Roll the Bones, and I wasn't super fond of it, was sort of kind of the idea or the concept of permanent waves, and a little bit maybe even moving pictures. So simplifying the sound, simplifying the overall resonance, I would say. So removing a lot, not so especially in the synthesizer era, but also in the first, let's just say, the concept record, the Caress of Steel, or 2112 to Hemispheres era, when they made these intricate stories, and they started to progify themselves really a lot. They pushed a lot sonically. They pushed a lot, and now with moving pictures, and especially with permanent waves, they kind of removed, and they're doing the same thing here with Roll the Bones, just a little bit more polished, more modernized sound. And I'm not a huge fan of it, but when I listen to it, I like it. And I had kind of the same feeling with Counterparts. You could make the case that Counterparts is Roll the Bones too, but I think Counterparts has some improvements on this concept. But kind of in terms of Rush, the songs are a little bit more stripped, and they're not so in your face, like super intricate. You wanna listen to it more when you're relaxed, and listen a little bit more in depth, because all the changes and the cool stuff they do is more on the lower layers. You have to listen to the subtleties. All in all, not a bad album. The sound could be better. Not my primary cup of tea, but they definitely have some good numbers. You got Neurotica is good, Heresy, the Big Wheel. So they have good, even great songs. But again, when you put it in the context of Rush, is not super great. And I could just repeat myself and say pretty much the same thing about Counterparts. For some reason, when I picked up Counterparts, I don't know, I had like a revulsion to it. I couldn't get into it, and it took me a good while until I say, hey, this is not so much different than Roll the Bones. And Roll the Bones was also not a big favorite. Like after Presto, I was not really enthused neither by Roll the Bones nor by Counterparts. Nevertheless, it definitely has its moments. It's a good listen, but just like Roll the Bones, you wanna sit down with a cup of tea, or maybe a glass of a good drink, and dim the lights and just listen. And you have to be in the mood to it. So good, very good. very good record if you kind of get into that mentality. It's not definitely not a defining or a very characteristic Rush, right? You can say that Judas Priest, every Judas Priest record is classic Judas Priest. With Rush, it's not like this. This is not classic Rush. Test for Echo. When I heard it, I jumped and I said, finally, thank you, thank God, thank Geddy Lee, thank Neil, thank Alex, who is unfortunately a little overshadowed, right? Because you have this guy Geddy, who, when you see him in conversations and interviews, he's such a nice, sweet, cool, quiet, gentle guy, and on stage he's like jumping around, and he reminds you kind of Burke Shelley of Budgie. Those of you who know, and like very very prominent, and his shrieky voices. He has a big stage presence, not a Bruce Dickinson stage presence, but nevertheless more of a musician, or like in Presto. Like, to me, I always imagined Geddy Lee kind of like a magician, right? So Presto was such a fitting thing. To me, Test for Echo was a very expected and anticipated return to the 80s, so to the Signals to Presto era. And I get it. It's not how it's being understood, or definitely not how it's being marketed or understood by most of the fans. But when I heard it first, that was my perception. Is not at all that synth-laden as that era, but it kind of plays into that vein. I think that this one sort of bridges the Roll the Bones counterparts a little bit with pretty much with everything that they did. So they have on the undercurrent, let's just say that the visual or the overall feel is a little bit kind of like the Hold Your Fire meets Power Windows kind of little signals in it, but a little bit more stripped, a little bit more on par or commensurate with counterparts in Roll the Bones. Very very good record, definitely in my top Rush records. So Totem, Dog Ears, The Color of Right, Driven, have all of them. They're really very very good. It's a good listen. It's an easy listen. A lot of classic Neil, and great record. Let's put it this way. To me, this is a must-have Rush, even if you're not a Rush fan. But this is definitely, if you have to have one from the 90s, like one from each decade, I would say Hemispheres from the 70s, Grace Under Pressure from the 80s. This is the one from the 90s. And this, in a way, closes the first chapter of Rush in general, but definitely what you would call Rush's third or maybe fourth era. Let's just say fourth, because you have Rush and Fly By Night, and some people would maybe even annex Caress of Steel here. So the hard, rockier, edgier kind of Rush with the very shrieky voices, to then the very prog laden, the 2112, the Hemispheres. Then you have let's just say Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, which is kind of almost an era of its own, but let's just say the bridging the two eras. And then you have the synth era of the 80s, and then the 90s, and Test for Echo seals that. But unfortunately, it also seals the then current history of the band, because Neil would go on through some terrible personal tragedies, losing his daughter, I think, to cancer or an accident, and then his wife just couldn't handle it, and she died out of sorrow and longing for the daughter and the tragedy. So they thought that Rush was over. Of course, as you can imagine, Neil was in a very difficult mental state, and then, as he writes in his biography, he went on a cross-country motorcycle trip, and he slowly rehabilitated himself. And in 2002, they decided that they would become a band again, or regroup. I don't think they ever formally disbanded, but this was the biggest pause in the band's history. So Test for Echo was released in 95, 96, and the next record, which would be Vapor